You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's account is from an individual that shared what happened to him and his sister when they were two little kids out picking blueberries in the quiet forest of Oscoda, Michigan. What happened on the trail in front of them? This is Richie's story about the creature that wouldn't stop, so stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Richie today. Richie's an individual I got connected to that had an interesting thing happen to him over on the eastern side of Michigan, up there, kind of in the north, not in the UP, but you know we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Richie, welcome to the show today. How's it going, man?
So far so good, Jeremiah. Yourself?
Doing great. Always a good time when I'm able to chat with someone in the afternoon about what they've experienced. This is an interesting area. Listeners might remember, if you're looking at a map, that we have talked to an individual over there in Glennie before. That's actually one of the most listened episodes of the podcast. But this time we are focusing on a town called Oscoda over there on the, edge of Lake Huron, it looks like. So, Richie, I'm going to go ahead, though, and I want to pass things over to you so that you have the time to share what you experienced. Feel free to take us back to that day, anything that we need to know to help set the stage, sure. And the floor is yours, sir.
Well, again, this was August 1971 by latest. I mean, might have been a year earlier, but my oldest sister and I were blueberry picking in the woods of Oscoda, Michigan. She was breaking my chops a little bit because I was actually picking more blueberries than her, and she's kind of giving me a hard time. And at one point, when I'm looking over at her, showing her that I still have more berries than her, I saw something walking up the trail towards us, and it clearly wasn't human, but it was walking upright. And I just, I thought, well, what is that? And again, it wasn't walking scary. It was just walking. It was just out taking a walk. But as soon as my sister, her name was Christy, as soon as she looked over at it, boom. I mean, she freaked, she screamed, she said, run. And she grabbed me. And, and of course, I always reacted to how she would react to something. Of course, I would probably over the top it. So there we are together, just running and screaming up the trail away from this thing. And excuse me. And once it was out of sight, she's like, she stopped and she's like, well, maybe it's not following us anymore. And so we just kind of looked up the path behind us. And then all of a sudden there's its head, there's its shoulders, there's its weight. It's coming towards us still, but it's just walking nice. It's just walking casually, but still, we turned around and headed towards the main road, just running and screaming. When we got back to the main road, we sort of ran and walked back to our cottage where our parents were, and they didn't believe us. They, and by that time, the only thing that I had ever seen that looked remotely like that was King Kong from the 1933 version. So I'm thinking, well, it must have been a gorilla. And of course, my dad's like, Rich, there's no gorillas in the United States. There's no gorillas. But, I'd never heard of Bigfoot at that time. But they didn't believe us, no matter how freaked out we were. My sister and I would kind of talk about it on and off during the years. And again, it was years later, I was watching the Steve Austin, or the $6 Million Man Bigfoot episode with Andre the Giant playing Bigfoot. And I'm like, I think that's what we saw. And and that just kind of, from there, it sparked an interest in Bigfoot. I would go to the library and whatnot, and I'm like, that's what we saw. I know that's what we saw. And she would kind of not really get into it, or didn't even want to accept it until we were both adults much years later, and said, yeah, that's probably what we saw. She still thinks it was going to eat us. I think we missed out on an opportunity. That's pretty much it.
What was the opportunity you feel that you missed out on?
I just, again, the Bigfoot was just walking towards us very casually. And I just think that maybe it saw us as just a couple of kids, maybe, again, I've read certain things where, Bigfoot kind of knows that, human beings can be kind of cruel and this and that, but not so much kids. And I think it just saw us as just a couple of kids, and maybe it was just going to walk by us and smile or whatnot and just continue on its way. Because it was coming our way. And even after we stopped to look back, like I said, it was still just casually walking. But again, it was black hair all over, or dark hair all over. Even from that distance, you could see there was hair all. I mean, it had that kind of a gorilla-shaped head, and and very long arms. And again, my sister and I, we still talk about, after I found that Bigfoot Facebook site where I put our story. She loved it, and she's like, yeah, that's exactly how I remember it, even now. Except, again, she thought that Bigfoot meant to do us harm. But,
wow, that is extremely interesting. So you got, at least for a few seconds, a pretty good view of the face of whatever was of what was coming towards you, right?
Yeah, I would say maybe it was 50 yards, away from us. And again, the trail was kind of hilly, I guess you could say, because again, once we ran just a little bit, we couldn't see it because it wasn't just a flat trail, and all of a sudden, we could just see like its head, shoulders, etc., just kind of coming back towards us. But again, it had hair all over its head and around its chin, and it had hair all over it. It was not a person. Even at that age, we would have recognized it, because had it been a person, we wouldn't have been running the way we did. There's someone coming. Well, we're just picking blueberries, but no, this was not a person.
Absolutely. I found that something I struggle with, and I'm trying to get better with it, is how to visualize distances, right? And so when we say 50 yards away, if I'm to look that up real quick, it's similar to the length of 2 swimming pool lengths. Would that be pretty accurate?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Probably.
Very good.
But I mean, again, it was close enough to see that it had hair all over its head, and again, it had no clothes on. It was close enough for me to make that detail when I first saw it coming. Because again, when I first saw it coming at us, I didn't feel any fear at first. I just thought, well, what the heck is that? And so then I asked her, and of course, Chris got real intense, and I like I said back then, I always fed off of her emotions. So.
Absolutely, and I'm trying to picture that myself. And I believe if I had seen something 2 swimming pool lengths away, I'd be able to see some details as well.
Right.
From what you remember, and I do know this is years ago, but do you remember any other details about the face? Could you see eyes at all, or eye details?
Not so much eye details at all, but again, once we got back to our parents and I kind of cooled down a little bit, and it just, to me, the head, it was shaped sort of like the way King Kong's was in the 1930s. I mean, that was my first thought, that, it must have been a gorilla, because at that time I didn't know that gorillas didn't walk on 2 feet, because King Kong did, but it definitely had hair all the way around its face, all over its head. And again, it was hairy basically from head to toe.
Gotcha. You say the hair was all over the face. Were you able to see the nose at all, or was that covered with hair as well?
Well, I think like the very center, if what I remember, there was some detail. There was less hair like around the nose and whatnot, because it looked like the middle of the head, there was not so much hair. But the way the hair was around the top of the head and around like underneath like the chin and whatnot, it wasn't human. He or she wasn't human.
Absolutely. Were you able to see any teeth during any part of this? No. Okay.
No.
Gotcha. And how would you describe the neck of the creature, if that was something you were able to notice?
Well, again, to me, if I remember right, it looked like it was almost real beefy in the shoulder area, so where you couldn't really see the neck, and it had longer arms than what we as humans have. But it looked like it was kind of real beefy around the shoulder area, almost like a bodybuilder when they have those big muscles between the shoulder and the neck. So I didn't really notice the neck. It just looked like there was just big shoulders, then the head. And, yeah.
Gotcha. Thinking about
long arms.
Absolutely. Those arms that we just mentioned, how far down then would the hands go if they were like on the side of the body?
It almost, I would say close to the knees. I mean, it would, because I know mine's maybe to my thigh, but it definitely looked, again, like the arms were longer than a human being. Because, again, right away, that was the first thing that I recall thinking, well, what is that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Is a kind of a weird question, but, thinking back in your memory and what you saw of the head shape of the creature, was the size of it similar to any household objects that you might be able to think of?
No, not really.
Okay. Gotcha.
Not really.
No problem. Was there anything that you noticed that, the years since you've gotten into some Bigfoot related things, right? You've watched some stuff, you've read some stuff probably. Is there anything that you remember from that day that you're like, man, all these other people, they're getting it wrong. They're not getting this one thing that we noticed during this blueberry picking session?
Well, again, I think it was the calmness of the whole situation, except for my sister and me. But again, this thing, it was just walking at a nice pace. There's no way, I just don't believe that this animal meant us any harm. And so for anyone that maybe has a horror story, or that, again, watched that Andre the Giant $6 Million Man episode, this wasn't like that. The thing was just walking. It was just out for a walk.
And that brings up a great thing to talk about. So thinking back about what you saw that day, would it fit more like you're walking down the street and you see it walk by you, or is this something that you would have seen in a zoo perhaps?
Well, I mean, it definitely is. I guess you could say almost like in the zoo, but it definitely wasn't walking. It wasn't human, but it was walking intelligent. It definitely had to have seen us, and it was just walking of right mind, and it wasn't. I'd swear to it that it didn't mean us any harm.
A lot of people will say that it seemed to walk with purpose, which kind of goes with what you're saying as well. Was there anything out of the ordinary about the way that it walked, or was it pretty normal looking?
Well, since it was the first one I'd seen, anything like that I'd ever seen, I mean, normal didn't really fit in, but, and had we not just taken off running and screaming the way we did, I could have, but it just, it knew where it was going, and it was just, again, my sister and I were out there early enough in the day to where, we knew it was going to be just us. No, nobody else, no adults out there. It was going to be just us. And again, without being too redundant, it just seemed like it was out on a stroll. I mean, maybe it had a purpose. It was going someplace specific, but that trail, actually, again, we were maybe a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile to a mile in on this trail that led to the main road. So maybe at some point it was going to get off that trail and head back into the woods, but who's to say? Like I said, I feel like we just kind of missed an opportunity by running and screaming the way we did.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Was there anything else happening that day before you had the visual sighting that kind of tipped you off to like, okay, something weird is about to happen?
No, not at all. It was, like I said, my sister she was real competitive. And, again, she's like, come on, I'm going to pick more blueberries than you today. And we were up before our parents, and we let them know we're heading out. We're going across this, because our cottage was right on Ettan Lake. Across the street was the woods. And basically we would walk, I don't know, a ways up the main road before we would hit that trail where all the blueberries would be growing. And, again, the whole time she was just kind of giving me, I'm going to pick more than you today. I'm going to, da-da-da-da-da. So it was, we were all fired up. I was going to pick more than her. She's going to pick more than me. And once we got going, started picking them, my bucket was a little more full than hers. So she's kind of giving me attitude. And at one point, I'm just kind of rubbing it in her face. And that's, again, when I saw what I saw walking up the trail. And, yeah. And when she saw it, things went differently. And, again, by the time we got back to the main road after running and screaming like a couple of little banshees, she had more blueberries in her bucket than I did.
What would you say is the main thing you remember that makes you think, yes, what we saw that day was a Bigfoot and not like a bear that was there trying to get blueberries as well?
The way it was walking. A bear's got those short legs. Or at least all the bears I've seen in like the movie The Edge and whatnot, when they stand up and you can hear a bear growling and this and that. This thing was just walking, and it wasn't a bear. And again, I don't know why a bear would have been walking on just two legs that far away from us.
Makes sense. Have you ever been back to that same spot since that time?
Oh, yeah. We pretty much would go there every year until about 1977. Yeah. And, oh, yeah, I would go back there. Yeah, I would go up that trail almost at least once every year after that until, like I said, about 1977. And, nope, never saw it again.
In the time afterwards where you started to look into different media related to the subject, did you ever start to look in to see if other people had similar encounters in the same area?
No, I didn't. Like I said, I got a little, it was funny. I always knew where our public library was from the year before, because the year before I saw that that $6 Million Man episode, the movie Jaws came out. So I was just hooked on reading about great whites. And then, of course, after seeing the $6 Million Man episode, I had to go back because I think this is what we saw. And, but no, as far as anyone else from Oscoda, I don't know. I never heard of anyone else talking about having seen Bigfoot in those woods.
That's extremely interesting. Do you feel that this encounter you had as a young child affected you in any other ways besides starting to be really focused on Bigfoot in later years?
Well, I would love to go back to that area. I know that from what I understand, that whole area has been developed and it's just homes now. But, I always felt like, man, I should go back there one day. I don't know if I'll ever make it back to Oscoda again, but yeah, I think about that a lot. It's, like I said, it's a very lucid, clear memory. I know what I saw. And again, my sister, she has a little bit more of it was ferocious story than me, but that's just, she saw it differently. but she knows that she agrees that it wasn't it was not a person.
You mentioned that you had a discussion with your parents about this as a child. They didn't believe you. Did you happen to have a discussion about that with them when you were an adult as well?
Oh yeah. Well, like I said, after that $6 Million Man episode, I remember, because I wasn't watching it with my sister, but I did watch it with my dad, and I'm like, you know what? I think that's what Chris and I saw that time up in Oscoda, and he didn't take me seriously at first. And when I, explained to him what happened that day again, he's like, "Oh, that again? Da, 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 da. You said that was a gorilla. Now it's a Bigfoot. Well, which is it? Make up your mind." I'm like, "Well, I was a little kid then. I didn't know what a Bigfoot was." But no, Dad didn't believe in like UFOs or, he didn't believe in Bigfoot. So, and he just wasn't going to believe in it. I think we may have talked about it once, like when I was in my 20s. And, but again, he would just always brush it off as, "No, you guys did not see a Bigfoot. You were little kids. You didn't know what you saw." Well, that's right. I didn't know what I saw. But as I got older, I realized what I saw. And it's not like the memory is just as clear today as, again, I remember, I can still kind of feel my throat hurting from all the darn screaming I did. So, yeah.
I know what that's like. Yeah, I've talked about that before on the show, talking to a parent, and they just, nope, don't want to deal with it. But anyways, some people, when they have experiences like this, they'll have other experiences later in life. Is that anything that's happened to you where you've had maybe not other Bigfoot related things happen, but things that are just out of the ordinary or weird?
Well, up at that same cottage, about 3 cottages down from where the cottage was in Oscoda, some relatives of my father died. And yeah, there were times as a little kid at night, if let's say my folks would be out on the lake fishing and my sisters were kind of watching me or whatnot, and I'm just kind of out playing, sometimes I would hear weird sounds from this one cottage where our distant relatives, I guess they died in it. And there was one time I was by that cottage and I heard a really weird, it sounded like a person, but like a person in pain. And what is that? And all of a sudden I saw my dad kind of walking around from the other side, and he was not the kind of guy that would mess with a kid like that. So I just remember asking him, did you hear that? Did you hear that? And he's like, "Hear what?" And again, I know I heard something. I don't know if that is in any way connected to the Bigfoot sighting. Again, they were both around the same time, very, very early 1970s.
That is very interesting. It makes you almost, wonder if it's a thing where maybe you guys are more receptive to things, or, maybe he did hear it and he's just, not wanting to say that he did. That's all speculation, but that's very interesting.
It's very true, though.
Yeah. So you have multiple things happening in this cabin area that are weird.
Yeah. Yes, in Oscoda, Michigan. And again, the cottage was right on Ettan Lake. The cottage where we would stay. Again, the cottage where I heard the weird sounds, with it was like 3 cottages down, but it was still on Ettan Lake, directly across the street from the other side from the woods where we saw Bigfoot. Yeah.
Gotcha. And are those still in the family or not?
I know. By 1977, my dad's family had sold that property off, and well, that was it. We never went back after that.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm sure that you've thought over the years about that visual sighting you had, and so many people, they're like, "Oh man, I wish I had that as well." But is that anything that you would like to ever have a sighting like that again?
Oh, 100%. I would, because again, I just feel like we missed out on an opportunity. We could have possibly, I mean, who in this world could say, hey, I high-fived or I shook hands or I touched the Bigfoot. And and again, this thing was just walking towards us. It meant us no harm, and it wasn't afraid of us just from the way it was walking towards us. I mean, I'm sure by the time we started running and screaming for the second time, it was probably laughing its butt off at us. But other than that, no, I would love to have have another chance to cross paths with a Bigfoot.
Trying to think of how to say or ask this. Do you have any advice for those individuals that might be putting themselves in the situation where they're trying to have a visual sighting and what to do if they do ever have that sighting?
I would say don't be afraid. And I would say don't run away. If, that would be for me, because again, looking back, I only got afraid because, again, I would always, it didn't matter if it was an angry situation back then, because my sister was kind of like my boss, because if my parents were like out on the lake fishing that night, she was in charge of me. If we were back home, because we were raised in Lansing, Michigan. If we were back home and it was summertime and folks were working, she was the boss. She was in charge of me. It was just, that's how that was. So I would always kind of react to how she reacted. But I just remember when I first saw it walking towards us, I didn't feel any fear at all. I knew it wasn't a person. And that's why I asked her, what is that walking towards us? Because, she's the older sister. She would know. And, of course, she reacted the way she did, and I reacted to how she acted.
Is a question I have about your sister. It is kind of tricky because she's not here, but
right.
Just here, maybe you'll be able to answer, maybe not, and either way is no problem. But, this definitely affected you in a way where you got interested in the subject. Did it affect her as well, do you think?
I know maybe when her and I were both in our early 20s, she's starting out raising a family and whatnot, and I'm start in the workplace and whatnot. And I think there was one time we were on the phone, and because she lived in Michigan, I lived here by then, and I think I kind of mentioned it. Remember that time at the cottage, when we saw Bigfoot? And yeah. She just didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to hear about it then. But over the years, especially since the internet and whatnot is, kind of taken over our lives, I'll text her or email her photos or videos of this, and I'm like, this is what we saw. And she doesn't mind talking about it now. And, and again, her memories pretty much match mine, other than the fact that she thinks that Bigfoot wanted to have us for breakfast.
Gotcha. So she had a different interpretation, which is Bigfoot wanted to have you for breakfast, but it sounded like you were kind of looking at it a little differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. You mentioned before that you've tried to share this a few times, and there's been a lot of people that haven't believed you over the years, and
right.
Maybe there's been some ridicule involved, which is definitely unfortunate. Why would you? I love those dogs.
Sorry about that.
You're good. Yeah. Why would you decide now to come on a larger platform to share something that's gotten you ridicule in the past?
Well, it's because for one, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not lying about it. It's true. I mean, and again, when I found, Facebook's kind of, I just had Facebook for years just to kind of post photos on my this and that. And then you find these groups, and just within just this year, I found a Bigfoot group. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And from there, I decided to kind of put what I remembered about that day down in my notes on my phone. And the story just kind of took root from there. And I just thought, let me post this and see what everyone else thinks. And by then I follow, or I'm a member of, I don't know, 2 or 3 Bigfoot groups. And, all of the responses I got from that story have been positive. I mean, yeah, there's been a couple of smart remarks, but when you put things out there, things are going to come back, and some of those things that come back aren't going to be what you want to hear. That's just a fact.
But it is great that it sounds like you've maybe even been able to help some people through just them hearing your story. So I would imagine that's
I hope
happened.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Richie, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show and for sharing what happened to you when you were a young child. I want to make sure that you were able to share everything that you had come to the show with today.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Unless you have any other questions. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's everything I have in the story that you read on that Facebook page and what I told you today. There's no embellishment. It's just what I remember. And I know, I think the next day after that, when we saw that, I know our parents, my sister and I just couldn't let it go. We saw something in the wood. And again, by then I thought, well, it must've been a gorilla, because I didn't hear anything else. So I know, I think it was the next day, my sister and I went with our parents in the car, and we're driving up this trail where we were picking blueberries. And of course we saw nothing. We may have passed a few people along the way, but this was late in the day, late in the afternoon, when a lot of people were on the trail, picking blueberries, just hanging out, just taking in the sights and whatnot. But no, no one ever believed Chris and I. I don't know if she ever talked to her family, like her kids and her husband, about it. I really don't know. But I have no problem talking about it, because it's true. I know what I saw. It took, because I was so young, it took a while for me to know what I saw. So yeah, maybe I sounded like a dummy saying, "Oh, we saw a gorilla in the woods in Oscoda."
You took what you saw and you used the references you had as being that young a child, and it totally makes sense. Yeah. I just want to say, Richie, thank you so much for coming on the show and for trusting us with your account. I really appreciate you coming on today, sir.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, Jeremiah. I guess I had to start over. My name is Mark McKim. I'm on the southeast side of Houston, Texas, in the Kemah, Texas area on Galveston Bay. I've had a number of encounters up until the most recent was in November, recent November. Probably over the last 12 years, 13 years or so, I spent a ton of time in Colorado, and had, in my opinion, 12 different encounters. Most of them have been docile. One of them was maybe a little aggressive with four big, I call them big Harrys. But if you want to visit about it, I'd love for you to hear about it. It's Sunday evening. I don't know what the date is. I'm sorry. I had some surgery this week and I've kind of been out of it. So love to hear from you. Thank you, man. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to share a voicemail to be potentially featured on the show as well, head over to BigfootSocietyPodcast.com and hit the Share Your Encounter button. Just want to take a minute to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society Podcast. Richie's story is one of those encounters that stays with you, not just because of what the creature did, but because of what it didn't do. That calm, steady walk, the silence, and the question that still lingers, what might have happened if they hadn't have run? So huge thanks to Richie for sharing his memories so honestly and for reminding us that not every encounter is violent, but that doesn't make it any less powerful. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you never miss another story, and share it with a friend who loves Bigfoot, small town legends, or just childhood mysteries. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please be sure to follow the show and leave a quick review. 5-star positive helps more curious minds find us there. And if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in Michigan's North Woods, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, Sasquatch Summerfest is coming up very quickly, July 11th through the 12th in Oak Ridge, Oregon. Bigfoot Society listeners can get a 2-day pass for the price of a 1-day admission with code BFS at checkout. So grab your tickets now at www.sasquatchsummerfest.com. Thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop wondering what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.